She stood next to a car worth more than my entire street in front of a crowd of people who all looked like they'd been born holding a glass of champagne. And she laughed and said, "Tell you what, if the help can start it, I'll write him a check for $1 million." She meant it as a joke. The whole party meant it as a joke. A $2 million hypercar that the best technicians in the country couldn't fix. And the billionaire host was offering $1 million to the tired single dad in the catering uniform who'd been refilling their drinks all night. They laughed because the idea was so absurd. The poor man, the cleanup crew, fixing the machine that had defeated the experts. It was the funniest thing they'd heard all evening. I almost walked away. I should have walked away, but I'd already seen it. From across the room, while I was carrying a tray of glasses, I had seen the one small thing that every expert in that garage had missed. One loose wire tucked back where nobody thinks to look, in a place that meant nothing to them and everything to me. What none of those laughing people knew was that I had seen that exact kind of wire fail one time before, a long time ago, in a moment that had cost me almost everything, and that the reason I could see it now was the worst night of my entire life. But before I tell you about the wire, do me one quick favor. If you've ever been the person that a whole room laughed at because they decided you were beneath them, hit that subscribe button right now. This whole channel is built for the people who see what the experts miss. Go on, I'll wait. Now let me back all the way up. Because to understand how a catering worker fixed a hypercar at a billionaire's party, you first have to understand a closed-down repair shop, a son who deserved better than I could give him, and the one piece of knowledge I'd have given anything to never have learned. My name is Ray Okonkwo. I am 42 years old, and these days I work for a catering company, setting up parties, carrying trays, breaking down tables, cleaning up after rich people go home. It is honest work, and I am not ashamed of it. But it is not what I am. What I am, what I was for most of my life, is an auto-electrician. The best one in my city once, though there's nobody left to say so now. Let me explain what that means, because most people don't know. A mechanic fixes the parts of a car you can see and touch, the engine, the brakes, the metal of it. An auto-electrician fixes the nervous system, the wiring, the thousands of tiny signals running through a modern car, the invisible river of electricity that makes everything work. When a car has a problem that no mechanic can find, a problem where every part is perfect but nothing works right, that's an electrical problem, and that's when they used to call me. I could find a single bad connection in a car with 2 miles of wiring in it. My father taught me back in the old country, before we came here. He used to say a car talks to you through its wires, and most people never learn the language, but if you do, the car will tell you exactly what's wrong if you're quiet enough to listen. That, right there, is most of the story. Everything else is just details. I am raising my son alone. His name is David. He is 12 years old, and he is the finest thing in my life and the reason I get up in the morning. He's a serious boy, watchful, the kind who feels things deeply and says little about them. He was 9 when his mother died, old enough to remember her fully, old enough for the loss to leave a mark that I see in him on the quiet days. He keeps a photograph of Grace by his bed, and he has her steadiness, her way of going still and thinking before she spoke. I look at him sometimes, and I see her so clearly, it takes the breath out of me. Raising him alone has been the hardest thing I've ever done, and the only thing that's kept me alive, because a boy who's lost his mother cannot afford to lose his father too. And so, on the mornings when I didn't want to get up at all, I got up anyway, for him. You always get up for them. That's the whole secret of it. There is no other secret. His mother, my wife Grace, died 3 years ago. I'm going to tell you about that because I have to, because it's woven all the way through this story whether I want it to be or not. So hold on to it. I had my own shop once, Okonkwo Auto Electrics. I built it from nothing over 15 years, and it was good, and we were happy, Grace and David and me, not rich but solid, the kind of solid you build with your own hands. And then 3 years ago there was a fire, an electrical fire of all the cruel things, in the apartment above the shop where we lived. It started in the middle of the night. I got David out. I went back for Grace. I did not get Grace out. And the shop and our home and the woman I had loved since I was 19 years old were all gone by morning. I'm not going to dwell on it because I can't, even now. But I need you to understand two things that came out of that night, because they're the hinge of everything. The first is that the fire investigators determined the cause. It was a single faulty electrical connection in the old wiring of that building. One loose, corroded wire arcing in the dark that nobody had ever noticed, that had been waiting there for years. One bad connection took everything from me, and I, an auto-electrician, a man who had spent his whole life finding exactly that kind of fault in cars, had been sleeping 20 feet away from the one in my own home, and never knew it was there. I will carry that to my grave. The second thing is what it did to me. After Grace died, I could not do the work anymore. I could not. Every time I opened a car and looked at the wiring, I saw that night. I saw the one connection I didn't catch. My hands, which had never once shaken in 20 years of the most delicate work there is, began to shake. So I closed the part of myself that was an auto-electrician, the way you'd close a room where something terrible had happened, and I locked the door, and I took whatever work I could find that didn't ask me to look at wires. Construction for a while. Now catering. Anything. Just to keep David fed, just to keep us in our small rented rooms, just to keep going, because a 12-year-old needs his father even when his father is broken. So that's who was carrying a tray of champagne glasses at that party. A man who used to be the best in the city at the one thing in that whole garage that mattered, and who had spent 3 years refusing to be that man because being that man hurt too much. Now let me tell you about the party. The catering company sent me out to a private event at an estate so large I got lost twice just trying to find the service entrance. The host was a woman named Sloane Whitaker. If you follow the business world, you might know the name. Tech money, the new kind. The kind that arrives in a flood instead of being built up over generations. She was maybe 45, sleek and sharp and famous for being ruthless, the kind of person magazines call brilliant, and the people who work for her call other things. She was throwing a party for a few dozen of the most important people in her world, and she had a particular reason for it, beyond just showing off. She had recently bought a car, not just any car, a Bugatti, one of the rarest hypercars on Earth, a machine worth over $2 million, of which only a handful exist. She'd bought it as a trophy, the way people like her buy things, and she'd planned to unveil it that very night as the centerpiece of the party, to drive it out of the garage in front of all her important guests. Except it wouldn't start. I picked this up the way I pick up everything, quietly, while being invisible. The car had developed a fault. It turned over and died. It had been doing it for 2 weeks. And Sloane Whitaker had flown in factory-trained Bugatti technicians, the most specialized car people in the world, men whose entire careers were built around these exact machines, and they had spent days on it, and replaced parts that cost more than my car, and they could not fix it. The car simply would not start. And now it was the night of her party, and her $2 million trophy was sitting dead and humiliating in her glass-walled garage, and she was, underneath the perfect host's smile, absolutely furious about it. I was carrying drinks through that part of the house when I first saw the car. The garage was a showroom, glass on 3 sides, lit like a stage, and there it sat, this impossibly beautiful machine, with 2 technicians still bent over the open engine bay, looking exhausted and beaten. And I, a man who had sworn off this work forever, felt the old part of me, the locked-away part, stir against my will. Because I'm an auto-electrician, and factory technicians who replace parts and can't fix a no-start when every part is perfect, that's not a mechanical problem. That's an electrical problem. That's a problem in the nervous system. That's my language, the one my father taught me, the one I'd been refusing to speak for 3 years. I didn't mean to look closely. I swear I didn't. But you don't stop being who you are just because you've locked the door. As I passed with my tray, my eyes did the thing they've always done, the thing they did automatically for 20 years, and they traced the wiring in that open engine bay, fast, the way a reader's eyes move down a page without trying. And in maybe 4 seconds, while walking past with a tray of champagne, I saw it. Tucked back behind a heat shield, in an awkward low spot where you'd have to be on the floor and looking up to even notice it, there was a wiring connector, and it was not quite seated. It had backed out just slightly, maybe from heat, maybe from vibration, maybe it had never been fully clipped at the factory, just a hair loose. The kind of thing you would never find if you were looking for a big problem, because it isn't a big problem. It's the smallest problem there is. One connector, a millimeter out of place, breaking the circuit just enough that the car's computer wouldn't let the engine catch. I knew that fault. I knew it in my bones. Because a loose, intermittent connection like that, arcing and breaking contact in the dark, is exactly what killed my wife. I had spent 3 years not looking at wires precisely, so I would never have to see that kind of fault again. And here it was, in a $2 million car, in a billionaire's garage, hiding in plain sight from the best technicians in the world, visible to the one broken catering worker who happened to walk past with a tray and happened to be the only person in the building who'd paid for that knowledge with everything he had. I kept walking. I told myself it wasn't my business. I told myself to stay invisible, do my job, go home to David. That's what I'd been doing for 3 years, staying small, keeping the door locked. But the universe wasn't done with me that night. Because an hour later, when the party was in full swing, Sloane Whitaker decided to turn her broken trophy into a joke before her guests could decide it for her. That's a move powerful people make. If something humiliating can't be hidden, you get ahead of it. You make it your joke instead of theirs. So she gathered a crowd in front of the glass garage, drink in hand, and she made a whole performance of it. The famous car that wouldn't start. The geniuses from the factory who'd failed. And then, with the cruelty that comes easily to people who've never been on the receiving end of it, she looked around for the biggest possible contrast to those expert technicians, and her eyes landed on me, standing against the wall in my catering uniform holding a tray. "You," she called out, and the whole crowd turned. "Yes, you, with the tray. You want to try? The experts couldn't do it. Maybe we need fresh eyes." Laughter rippled through the crowd. She was grinning, playing to her audience. "Tell you what, if the help can start it, I'll write him a check for $1 million, right now. $1 million if the catering staff can do what the best technicians in the world couldn't." The laughter swelled. It was a great joke. The poor man and the impossible machine. People actually applauded. A man near me said, loud enough to be heard, "This I have to see," in the tone you'd use about a dog walking on its hind legs. And I stood there holding my tray, with my face hot and my heart pounding. And I had a choice to make that was about so much more than a car. Because here's the thing. I knew I could start it. I had seen the fault. It would take me 10 minutes and a pair of hands that knew where to push. But to do it, I would have to walk into that garage, get down on the floor, and put my hands back into the wiring of a machine, into the exact kind of fault that had taken Grace from me. I would have to unlock the door I'd sealed 3 years ago. I would have to become, in front of a crowd of people laughing at me, the man I'd been too broken to be since the night my wife died. And I thought about David, my son, 12 years old, at home with the neighbor who watched him on my work nights. And I thought about what it would mean for him if I came home and told him I'd had the chance to make our whole lives different, and I'd been too afraid to take it. And I thought about Grace, who had never once let me quit anything, who would have been so angry to see what I'd let myself become. I have to tell you, in that moment, standing against the wall with the laughter washing over me, I had a kind of conversation with myself that I think a lot of people have and never admit to. One voice said, "Stay small, it's safer. You've survived 3 years by staying small. Don't risk the one steady thing you've got left, your invisibility. And the other voice, quieter, the one that sounded a little like Grace and a little like my father, said, "You have been hiding from the best thing about yourself because it's tangled up with the worst thing that ever happened to you. And your son is watching you do it, and one day he will learn from you that when life knocks you down, you stay down." And I could not stand that second thought. I could survive a lot of things, but I could not survive teaching David that. So I set down my tray, and the laughter got louder because they thought I was actually going to embarrass myself, which to them was even better than the joke. And I walked into that glass garage, continued in the next part. The factory technicians straightened up as I came in, and one of them actually laughed and said, "Careful, don't touch anything. This isn't a lawnmower." More laughter from the crowd at the glass. I didn't answer him. I've learned that you don't answer that kind of thing. You just do the work and let the work answer. "Can I look?" I said to Sloane Whitaker. My voice came out steadier than I felt. She waved a hand grandly, performing for her guests. "By all means, the stage is yours." I walked to the open engine bay, and then, in front of 40 of the most important people in the city, I got down on the floor of that garage, on my back, and I slid partway under the edge of the engine compartment, the way I'd done 10,000 times in my old life. And I looked up into the place no one looks. And there it was, exactly where I'd seen it from across the room. The connector backed out a hair, the contact broken, the car's nervous system severed by a gap you could barely see. And for a second, lying on that floor, I was not in a billionaire's garage. I was in the burned-out shell of my own home, looking at the report, looking at the photograph of the one connection I'd missed. My hands started to shake, the way they had for 3 years. I lay there on the cold floor with my hands trembling and my dead wife's face in my mind, and I almost couldn't do it. I almost slid back out and walked away. And then I heard my father's voice from somewhere very far back. "A car talks to you through its wires. Be quiet enough to listen." And I thought, this wire is not the wire that killed Grace. This wire is just a wire, and maybe, if I can fix this one, it stops being the thing I'm afraid of and starts being the thing I'm good at again. Maybe this is how the door opens. I steadied my hand. I reached up, and I pushed that connector home until I felt it click, fully seated, the contact closed, the circuit whole. That's all it was. One push, one click, 10 seconds of work, in the one spot and $2 million of machinery that mattered, found by the one man in the building who'd paid for the knowledge with his whole heart. I slid out from under the car. I stood up. My catering shirt was filthy now. The crowd was still smirking, waiting for the punchline of their joke. The technician who'd mocked me rolled his eyes. I looked at Sloane Whitaker. "Try it now," I said. She gave the crowd a look, a here-we-go look, milking it, and she nodded to one of the technicians, who climbed into the car with an expression that said he was only humoring me. He pressed the start button, and the Bugatti roared to life. The sound of it filled that glass garage, the deep, savage, perfect sound of a 16-cylinder engine that 2 days of experts and a fortune in parts had not been able to produce. The whole crowd went silent. The technician in the driver's seat stared at the dashboard like it had betrayed him. And the engine just kept running, smooth and alive, the trophy finally awake. Nobody laughed now. Sloane Whitaker stood frozen, her champagne glass halfway to her mouth, staring at me, at the filthy catering worker who had just done in 10 seconds what the best technicians in the world couldn't do in 2 days. The smirk was gone from her face. Something else had replaced it, something I couldn't quite read. "How?" she said. Just the one word. "Loose connector," I said. "Behind the heat shield, low, where you'd never look unless you were under there. It backed out, probably from heat. Broke the circuit just enough that the computer wouldn't allow ignition. Every part on this car is perfect. There was nothing to replace. That's why they couldn't find it. They were looking for something broken. Nothing was broken. It was just disconnected." I wiped my hands on a rag. A car talks to you through its wires. You just have to be quiet enough to listen. The technicians were staring at me now with a completely different expression. One of them said, quietly, "Who are you?" And I almost didn't answer, but something in me, 3 years locked away, wanted to say it out loud just once. "I'm an auto-electrician," I said. I had my own shop. I was the best in this city at exactly this, finding the fault nobody else can find. I looked at the running car. I haven't done it in 3 years. "Why not?" Sloane Whitaker asked. And there was something different in her voice now, underneath the billionaire armor. Something almost careful. And I don't know why I told her the truth in front of all those people. Maybe because I was tired of carrying it alone. Maybe because the car was running and the door I'd locked was standing open and I couldn't pretend anymore. Because 3 years ago a loose connection like that one started a fire in my home, I said, and it took my wife. And I'm an auto-electrician who finds exactly that kind of fault for a living, and I was sleeping 20 feet away from the one in my own walls, and I never saw it. So I stopped looking at wires. I couldn't do it anymore. Tonight is the first time I've touched one since. I looked at her. Your car reminded me of the worst thing that ever happened to me, and I fixed it anyway because I have a son at home and I'm tired of being too afraid to be who I am. The glass garage was completely silent. The crowd that had been laughing 2 minutes ago was not laughing now. Some of them, I saw, looked ashamed. And Sloane Whitaker, the ruthless billionaire, the famous host, set down her champagne glass on the hood of a car worth $2 million, and when she spoke, her voice had gone rough. "My father was a mechanic," she said. The crowd murmured. This was clearly not something she said in public. A real one. Small shop. Worked with his hands his whole life. She was looking at me, but she was somewhere else. He died never understanding what I did for a living. He thought all of this, she gestured at the estate, the party, the wealth, was a kind of cheating. He used to say the only honest money was the money you made fixing something real. We didn't speak much at the end. I was too busy being important. Her jaw tightened. I bought this car to prove something, I don't even know what, and it sat there dead and made a fool of me in front of everyone, and the only person who could fix it turned out to be the one man here my father would have actually respected. The one I hired to carry the trays. She shook her head slowly. He'd have liked you. He'd have hated me tonight. Now, here is where I did the thing none of them expected. Sloane Whitaker reached into her bag, and she took out a checkbook, a real one, and she said, "I made a promise in front of all these people, $1 million if the help could start it. I'm a lot of things, but I keep my word. What's your name?" And I said, "I'm not going to take it." The crowd, which had only just started breathing again, went still all over. "Excuse me?" Sloane said. "I'll take fair pay for 10 minutes of skilled work," I said. "A fair wage? The kind I'd have charged in my shop. But I'm not taking $1 million for this. I can't." "Why on earth not?" she said, and she sounded genuinely bewildered. "You clearly need it. Why would you refuse $1 million?" And I told her the truth because we were long past anything else. Because the moment I take $1 million for it, it turns into a stunt, I said. The catering guy who got lucky at a rich lady's party. And that's not what tonight is. Tonight I touched a wire for the first time since my wife died, and I didn't fall apart, and the car started, and I remembered who I am. That's worth more to me than $1 million, and if I cash a check for it, I cheapen it. I've got a 12-year-old son who's watched his father be broken for 3 years. Someday, I want to tell him about tonight. And I need the story to be the night his dad got himself back, not the night his dad won $1 million off a joke. He needs the first story, so do I. Sloane Whitaker looked at me for a very long time, and then slowly she put the checkbook away. "You won't take my money," she said. "No, ma'am." "All right," she said. "Then I'm going to do something else, and you're not going to be able to stop me because it's not for you. It's for my father, who I never made things right with. And it's a little bit for me. Now, I told you this is not a fairy tale, and it isn't. I did not become a millionaire that night. I went home, filthy and shaking and more alive than I'd been in 3 years, and I sat on the edge of David's bed while he slept, and I cried, the good kind, the kind that means something has finally started to thaw. But Sloane Whitaker was a woman who got what she wanted, and what she wanted, it turned out, was to be a little more like the man her father had been. She could not give me $1 million because I wouldn't take it. So she found another way. She paid quietly to reopen my shop, not to give it to me, to lease me the space and the equipment at a rate I could actually afford, structured so that I owned more of it every year, so that within a few years it would be fully mine, built back with my own work the way the first one was. Okonkwo Auto-Electrics, open again, with my name over the door. She said it wasn't charity. She said she was investing in the best auto-electrician in the city, which was just good business, and that I could pay her back by being exactly that. She framed it so carefully that a proud man couldn't refuse it without being a fool. And she did one more thing. The shop reopened with a small sign in the window beside my name that I did not ask for and would never have dared to put there myself. It said the shop was dedicated to the memory of 2 people, Grace Okonkwo, and Sloane's father, the mechanic, whose name I won't share here because it was hers to give. 2 people who believed the only honest money was the money you made fixing something real. Their names, side by side, in the window of a shop that came back from the dead. I will never get over that. David comes to the shop after school now. He's 12, and he started asking me to teach him, to show him how the wires talk. And the first time he asked, I had to step into the back room for a minute, because 3 years ago I never thought I'd be able to do this work again, let alone pass it to my son the way my father passed it to me. The language goes on. The fire didn't take that. It turns out it couldn't. I'll tell you about the first thing I taught him, because it meant everything to me. I sat him down with an old wiring harness from a junked car, the way my father once sat me down, and I told him what my father told me, that every fault in the world, in a car or in a life, is just a connection that's come loose somewhere you weren't looking. And the whole art of it is learning to be quiet and patient enough to find the one that matters. David listened the way he listens, completely still, taking it in. And then he asked me, in that direct way he has, whether the fire that took his mom was a loose connection too. And I had to tell him the truth, because I have never lied to that boy. I said yes. And he was quiet for a while, and then he said, "Then I want to learn to find them, so I can fix them before they hurt anybody." And I had to step into the back room again. Because that is exactly the thing I have spent 3 years being too afraid to do, and my 12-year-old son walked straight at it, without flinching. He's braver than me. I think he got it from his mother. There's a version of that night where I take the $1 million, where I cash the check, and I never have to carry trays again, and maybe it even works out fine. And there is no version of that where I do that and also get to sit my son down someday and tell him the truth straight, with nothing bought and nothing owed, about the night his father stopped being afraid and became himself again. I picked the thing I could explain to my boy. I'd pick it every single time. I still think about that loose wire, the one in the Bugatti and the one in my walls. 2 tiny faults, a hair out of place, invisible to everyone. One of them took everything from me, and one of them, 3 years later, gave me back the part of myself I thought was gone forever. Same kind of fault, same kind of wire. The difference was only what I did when I found it. The first one, I never got the chance. The second one, I reached up and I pushed it home. So let me leave you with this tonight. A whole room of important people looked at me and saw the help. Somebody beneath them, somebody to laugh at. And the one thing in that building that none of them could do, I could do in 10 seconds, because I'd paid for that knowledge with the worst night of my life. They were all looking at my uniform. Not one of them thought to wonder what a man in a catering uniform might know, or what it might have cost him to know it. The thing they needed most was standing against the wall holding their drinks the whole time. So here is what I honestly want to know from you tonight. Have you ever been underestimated, written off, looked straight past by people who had no idea what you were actually carrying inside you? What's the thing you know, the thing you can do, that the people who look down on you would never guess in 100 years? And what did it cost you to learn it? Tell me about it down in the comments. I read every single one, and tonight yours is the one I want to hear. And if this story reached you, if you believe, like I've come to believe, that the people the world laughs at are often the ones carrying the most, then do me one small favor before you go. Subscribe so the next story finds you. Leave a like so it reaches one more person who's been underestimated tonight, and tell me what you know that nobody guesses. I'll be right here, reading every word.